Welcome to Evolutionary Biology. Today, we are going to explore one of the most famous, yet frequently misunderstood ideas in all of science, the concept of fitness. When you hear survival of the fittest, you might picture the biggest, fastest, or strongest animals dominating their environment. But nature operates on a very different set of rules. In this lecture, we will uncover what fitness truly means, how we measure it mathematically, and why it is the absolute engine that drives natural selection. Let us start by breaking down our everyday assumptions. Imagine a nature documentary showing two birds. One is incredibly strong and fast, but it only lives long enough to raise a single chick. The other bird is small and plain, but it blends into the trees perfectly and raises 10 healthy chicks. In everyday language, we would call the strong bird the fittest. But evolution does not care about your gym stats. It only cares about how many copies of your genes you successfully pass on to the next generation. Therefore, the small, plain bird is the true evolutionary champion. Now that we understand the intuition, let us look at the formal definition. In evolutionary biology, fitness is a strict quantitative measure of reproductive success and survival for a specific genotype or phenotype. It represents the average contribution that individuals with a particular genetic makeup make to the gene pool of the next generation. Biologists divide this into two main types. First, absolute fitness, which measures the raw survival and reproduction numbers. Second, relative fitness, which compares a specific genotype against the absolute best performer in that exact same population. This comparison reveals which traits natural selection is favoring. You might wonder why we need to be so precise about this. Understanding the concept of fitness is absolutely crucial because it is the mathematical engine that drives the entire theory of natural selection. Without a way to measure fitness, we could not predict how populations change over time. In the real world, this concept helps us understand critical issues like antibiotic resistance, where the fittest bacteria survive our medicines and multiply. It also guides conservation biologists in determining if endangered species can survive changing climates. Fitness turns an abstract philosophy into precise, measurable science. To truly understand how fitness works, we must look at the mathematics, starting with absolute fitness. Conceptually, this establishes a baseline for how well a trait performs in the wild. The formula is W equals N after divided by N before. Here, capital W represents the absolute fitness of a specific genotype. N after is the number of individuals with that genotype surviving after a selection event, like a harsh winter. N before is the initial population of that genotype. If W is greater than 1, the genotype is increasing. If it is less than 1, the genotype is declining. Before we move on, let us see this with a concrete example. Imagine a population of beetles with 3 shell colors: green, blue, and red. Initially, we have 100 of each. After a flock of hungry birds feeds on them, we count the survivors: 80 green, 40 blue, and 10 red. We need to find their absolute fitness. We choose the absolute fitness formula to find their raw survival rates. For the green beetles, we divide 80 by 100 to get 0.80. We do the same for blue and red. These final answers represent the raw survival rates for each genetic group. Now that we have the absolute fitness, we must calculate the relative fitness. Evolution is inherently a competition, so we need to know how a genotype performs compared to its peers. The formula is lowercase w equals capital W divided by W max. Lowercase w is the relative fitness, which always falls between 0 and 1. Capital W is the absolute fitness of the genotype we are evaluating. W max is the highest absolute fitness found in that specific population. Essentially, this formula grades the genotypes on a curve, giving the best performer a perfect score of 1. Let us apply this new formula to our beetle population. We are given the absolute fitness values we just calculated, and we need to find the relative fitness. We use the relative fitness formula because it allows us to compare evolutionary success. Looking at our values, the green beetles have the highest absolute fitness of 0.80, making it our W max. We divide each genotype's absolute fitness by this maximum. The green beetles score a perfect 1.0. The blue beetles score 0.5, meaning they are only half as successful. The red beetles score 0.125, putting them at a severe evolutionary disadvantage. To fully grasp what these numbers mean, let us look at this diagram. You are seeing a bar graph comparing the relative fitness of our 3 beetle genotypes. The horizontal axis shows the genetic groups, and the vertical axis shows their relative fitness score from 0 to 1. Notice how the green beetle bar reaches the absolute top at 1.0. The blue bar is exactly half that height, and the red bar is barely visible at the bottom. This visualizes the intense evolutionary pressure at play. Over time, this massive disparity means the green shell trait will completely dominate the population, while the red trait may disappear entirely. This brings us to our final mathematical tool, the selection coefficient. Biologists use this to measure exactly how strongly a genotype is being selected against. The formula is simply S equals 1 minus W. Here, S represents the selection coefficient, which is the evolutionary penalty or disadvantage. Lowercase w is the relative fitness we just learned to calculate. This formula tells us the exact proportion of fitness lost compared to the most successful genotype. If S equals 0, the genotype is the fittest. If S equals 1, the genotype is completely lethal and produces no surviving offspring. Let us see how this applies to human genetics. We are looking at a population where a genetic mutation causes a mild metabolic disorder. We are given that healthy individuals have a relative fitness of 1.0, while mutated individuals have a relative fitness of 0.75. We need to calculate the selection coefficient to quantify the evolutionary pressure against this disorder. We subtract the mutated relative fitness from 1. 1 minus 0.75 gives us a final answer of 0.25. Physically, this means individuals with the disorder suffer a 25% reduction in reproductive success. We have covered a lot of ground today, so let us review the key takeaways. First, remember that evolutionary fitness is not about physical strength. It is entirely about how successfully an organism survives and passes its genes to the next generation. Second, we measure this using absolute fitness for raw survival and relative fitness to compare traits against the population's best performer. Finally, the selection coefficient tells us the exact mathematical disadvantage weaker genotypes face. By mastering these concepts, you now have the tools to mathematically predict how natural selection shapes the future of any species.